Here's an E. E. Cummings poem that you might find a little easier than some of the others we've looked at. It's pretty straightforward. I'll read it and just make a couple of comments about it. Maggie and Millie and Molly and May went down to the beach to play one day, and Maggie discovered a shell that sang so sweetly she couldn't remember her troubles. And Millie befriended a stranded star, whose rays 5 languid fingers were. And Molly was chased by a horrible thing, which raced sideways while blowing bubbles. And May came home with a smooth round stone, as small as a world, as large as a loan. For whatever we lose, like a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. Well, first we might note the alliteration in line 1. Remember, alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds. Maggie and Millie and Molly and May. Sometimes students ask why alliteration matters anyway. Who cares whether consonant sounds are repeated? Poets are interested in all levels of language. Among other things, they're interested in how to make language more musical and how to make language stick in our minds better. Poetic devices, like alliteration, do both. The other thing I might note is that the poet uses rhyme at the beginning, then abandons rhyme in the middle, and comes back to it at the end. And, of course, we see Cummings' unusual use of capitalization, which we have come to expect from him. All that is pretty obvious. The vividness of this poem is in part the specificity of images involving the 4 girls and what happened to them on their trip to the beach. One found a seashell, another a starfish, one a smooth stone, and apparently Molly was chased by some form of crab. I don't know anything much about the life of Dr. Seuss, the well-known children's author and poet. But I have a hunch that Dr. Seuss was a student of E. E. Cummings. Many of Dr. Seuss's stories and poems sound a lot like this. Note the first line. Maggie and Millie and Molly and May went down to the beach to play one day. Take out the unusual parenthesis, and that could be a line out of Dr. Seuss. Note the second to the last stanza. May came home with a smooth round stone, as small as a world and as large as a loan. Again, very Dr. Seussian. Did you note the oxymorons in that expression? As small as a world? We normally think of something huge when we think of a world. And as large as a loan. Again, we don't normally think of a size adjective modifying alone. These unusual expressions do allow us to think about worlds and aloneness in different and interesting ways, much like Dr. Seuss tries to do. Cummings does occasionally have a gift for the memorable line, and I think that is one. And then I love the last 2 lines. For whatever we lose, like a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. If that doesn't sound like Dr. Seuss, I don't know what does. But it also sounds like E. E. Cummings. One thing we've seen from all of Cummings' poems so far is that he believes in the essential healthiness of nature. The closer we stay to nature and natural things, the better we live. The further we drift from nature, the more problems we have. Well, these little girls going to the beach is a form of going to nature and getting in tune with natural things. And what happens when we do that? We find ourselves. When we get away from nature for too long, we lose ourselves. Our priorities get screwed up. Our attitudes go sour. We aren't ourselves. When we get closer to nature, we find ourselves again. It's nothing more complicated than that. It's a nice poem that doesn't require a lot of complicated explanation.